That night was the darkest, longest I'd known in my centuries of flight from the sun. Restless to the point of madness, I heard the subtlest movements in the woods, smelled the decay of animals lying dead miles away. The nerves in my body formed a network of live wires, exposed, popping, near the point of conflagration. If now, with all my hopes, now when the moment to act announced itself like a giant bell tolling over the land, if now this partner who'd freely entered into a pact with me betrayed me, I knew not what heights my fury would reach. His flesh would rip, flesh as abhorrent to me in that moment as it had been enthralling for me the past year. How could I bear to let him live? Impossible. And he knew it. He knew it, but spoke still. That is from this book, Vampire Vow, by Michael Schiefelbein. Schiefelbein? I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. But this is the first book that I read for the first week of Horror Mayhem, which I believe was created by the Bookish and I will link them in the description. And a bunch of people, a bunch of other booktubers this year are participating in this Horror Mayhem reading month, and I decided to join in because I thought it would be fun, and I've got a lot of horror books I need to read. Of course, the first book I read isn't one that I actually own. This is one that I borrowed from Nikia. But the theme of the first week was supernatural creatures, monsters, that kind of thing. And I had already borrowed this a while ago, and it's really short, and it's gay vampire stuff. So what could be better, right? I read it, and it's very interesting. This was originally published in 2001. It does a lot of unexpected things in terms of the places that it goes, in terms of some of the depictions of things. But so the basic plot, this is about a vampire named Victor Decimus, who was a Roman officer under Pontius Pilate, and was deeply, deeply in love with Jesus Christ. Yes, that Jesus Christ. And him and Jesus were very good friends, were very close. And he wanted Jesus badly, but unfortunately Jesus rejected him to go, be Jesus. And Victor was so incensed by this that he goes on a rampage of rape and murder, and this leaves him no choice but to accept the offer of an Ethiopian vampire woman to become like her and to become a vampire. So, flash forward to 2,000 years later, and Decimus, or Victor, has been taking up residence as a monk in various cloisters throughout the world for the last 2,000 years. And he has over the centuries he has been so incensed by Jesus' rejection that he has vowed, which is the titular vow of the book, he has vowed to basically wage war on all of the sort of tenets of Christianity. And his most recent monastery that he goes to is one in St. Thomas, located in the Appalachian Mountains, where he quickly befriends Brother Luke, who's a young man who is very devoted to him, sexually, emotionally. And things don't turn out very well with Brother Luke, but during this, in the wake of this relationship, he ends up becoming close with another monk named Brother Michael, who is also has a lot of similar ideas to him in terms of philosophy, morality, but he's very resistant to sort of admitting his feelings to Victor. But of course, Victor isn't happy unless he can have what he wants, and so basically he goes on kind of a quest to corrupt Brother Michael, and to eventually make him a vampire as well, so that he can have a companion that can finally stay by his side throughout this dark existence. And along the way, he struggles with his vampire cravings and his thirst for blood, which leads to him killing various random people throughout the town, throughout the city. And that leads to a police investigation on top of everything else. And, of course, his lingering obsession with Jesu, or Joshu, as he is referred to in this book. So that's the basic rundown. Now, when I first heard about this book, I think I saw it in a video on gay horror novels. And based on kind of the cover and the overall vibe, I thought it was just kind of just going to be like, a generic, like, gay erotic horror novel, mostly focused on sex rather than, anything really truly dark or fucked up. Well, I was wrong. This book goes to a lot of places that I wasn't expecting, mainly in the depths of depravity that Victor sinks to. Within the first 20 pages of the book, he's killed and raped many people, including a young 14-year-old boy who eventually is driven to suicide, to hanging himself. And there's just a lot of sort of depravity like that. He's a surprisingly immoral, kind of reprehensible character, which is something that I found very interesting, that kind of conflation of sex and violence. I wasn't expecting that from this book. And the other interesting thing about it was that the author, Michael Schiefelbein, it says on the back here, he spent 10 years studying for the priesthood. You can tell. I'm not a religious person. I'm not very knowledgeable of religious practices, but the daily sort of minutia that the monks go through in this book, all the rituals, all of the sort of philosophical and spiritual discussions that they have, it seems very believable to me. It feels authentic, which is interesting because here's a vampire who is so knowledgeable of the ways of Christianity, and yet his ultimate goal is to kind of destroy it from within by like corrupting all of these monks, as sort of a weird way of getting back at Jesus for not having sex with him. So essentially this book is one vampire's sort of as it says on the back here, frenzy of rape and violence and corruption, just because Jesus wouldn't have sex with him. I mean, I know some of us have had bad breakups, and we go through periods where we're very angry and upset and emotional, but how many of us have spent 2,000 years pining for one person to the point that we seek to destroy his entire religion? But it's an interesting book. It's very beautifully written, as you could tell from that passage there. It's very lyrical. It uses a lot of biblical language. There's a lot of discussion, a philosophical discussion in the book about sort of religious philosophy, theology, morality. One of the things that I also found interesting about it was that a lot of it deals at the intersection of Christianity and mysticism, in the fact that Brother Michael, on top of being a monk, also has a background growing up in New Orleans with a grandmother, I think it's his grandmother, named Jaina, who had sort of mystical powers. She was very into, I don't know if it's described specifically as voodoo, but that kind of stuff, pagan beliefs. And he has various visions and things related to said pagan beliefs, and he has some of his own sort of powers that he picked up from being raised in this culture, which is interesting because it's, as I said, it's that contrast of Christianity and mysticism. And it's also really interesting because, one, it's also very erotic, surprisingly. I mean, maybe not surprisingly, because it is a gay horror novel, but the balance of sex and violence and the lyrical writing and the theological stuff. There's a lot of talk about New Orleans because that's where Brother Michael grew up. Obviously, it has really heavy shades of Anne Rice, of Poppy Z. Bright, but I don't think Anne Rice especially ever went this far in terms of sex, especially. One of the things that I thought was really interesting about it is it really brings out kind of the inherent kind of underlying erotic element to a lot of religious practices. There's a lot of talk in the book about sort of sex and love as a religious experience. Again, and another thing that surprised me, there are several passages in the book that feature some very potentially blasphemous depictions of Jesus in ways that I feel like most Christians probably wouldn't like to see Jesus. But I thought that was really, really interesting, how they made they made religion this very sexually charged, very passionate thing, rather than this kind of cold, dead, lifeless entity, which is kind of what Victor is sort of railing against sort of the meaningless sort of piousness of these brothers for something that he doesn't even see the value of. There's a lot of talk in the book about, do you want to spend eternity on your knees and things like that. So it's a very, very interesting book. My issue with it was that it's just barely over 200 pages. It was way too short, and things moved way too fast. Towards the end of the book, within like 6 pages, characters are flip-flopping all over the place. There's all this stuff going on. There's this huge climax, and it all just it just happens so fast. It's like someone turned a switch, and the characters are all of a sudden going on this, going down this path. And I just really would have liked to have seen more of a slow burn in terms of this. I would have liked to seen, especially in terms of how Victor sort of corrupts Brother Michael. His sort of slow discovery and seduction of Michael, I thought, was just happened very quickly, and I felt like with all the things that Brother Michael was struggling with spiritually, it didn't really seem very believable to me, or not believable, but it just happened too quickly. I would have liked a little bit more detail on sort of the mental, the psychological games that Victor played, and on Michael's sort of psychological state as he gets to this point where he sort of starts to want to be with Victor. So I liked this book. It was interesting. There are several sequels, I believe. Nakia has the first sequel, which I think I'm going to read after this. Because I would definitely like to see where it goes from here. It definitely ends in a way that I wasn't expecting, which I liked in some ways and didn't like in other ways, but for what I originally thought was just going to be kind of just a generic, like, erotic horror novel, turned out to be a little bit more thoughtful and a little bit more intriguing than I originally expected it to be. And the erotic elements, of course, are very, very erotic. There's a lot of course, being a vampire novel, there's a lot of eroticism involving blood and violence, the conflation of sex and violence, and the idea of blood being the life and that kind of thing. There's a lot of that in this book. So it was a really interesting book. I don't think it was entirely successful. I didn't love it. I think it was a little too short, a little too fast-paced. But it was interesting, and I would like to read the sequel, at least the first one, just to kind of see where it goes. And I believe the sequels are also longer than the first book, so hopefully the story is kind of expanded on more. So I don't know if I would call this sort of a hidden gem or a lost classic or anything. But if you like vampires, if you like sort of gay horror, that kind of thing, I think you might find it really interesting. Of course, forewarning, Victor is very much not a likable character. He's incredibly reprehensible. He does a lot of terrible, terrible things. He manipulates people. He's toxic. He's violent. He's a rapist. There's lots of killing of children in this book. Like I said, it goes places I wasn't expecting it to go. It's not quite as extreme as something like Exquisite Corpse, but it is surprisingly full on in a way that I wasn't expecting. But I enjoyed. It was interesting. It was very interesting. So yeah, and I think this was a good way to sort of kick off the first week of Horror Mayhem. So I hope to see you guys next week, where I will be talking about Gothic horror, and you'll have to see what I'm reading for that when I post the review. But for now, the first week of Horror Mayhem, this was Vampire Vow by Michael Schiefelbein. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you guys later. Bye.